Welcome to Behind the Build. I am your host, Jonathan Jacobs. And before I tell you who's on today, I'm going to remind you that if you're listening to this, there's something you may or may not have done yet, and that is to give this 5 stars. 5 stars is really going to help with our ability to get an outreach to a larger listening demographic. So please make sure you do that. And you can also follow the podcast on Instagram by looking for the logo Behind the Build. It's a blue logo, white lettering, and you'll be able to see the beautiful projects of those that have been on here and what they want to display as their showpiece for what they do. That said, it is time to get into part 2 with snow architecture in Yukon territory. Welcome back, Chris and Jackie. It's a pleasure to have you back on. Pick up the conversation from where we were. Thanks for taking time in the early morning for this.
Of course.
Yeah, of course.
So my time, it is currently 11:30 Eastern, and it is what, 9:30?
It's 9:30 Yukon time.
Yeah, okay.
We have our own time zone.
Oh, I didn't actually know that. Oh, you got your own time
Pretty
zone?
new.
Yeah, as of 2 years ago, we stopped doing daylight savings.
Yeah.
So we're on Pacific part of the year and mountain part of the year, which is wild because we're
Cool.
further west than Vancouver. So that doesn't make a lot of sense.
So right now we're on mountain time.
We're on mountain
So
time.
it's
yeah.
very dark outside.
Yeah. So before we started the recording, Jackie was kind enough to rotate her computer's camera over to her left, my right, and saw the window, and there was nothing bright out there. It was pure darkness.
I know.
Yeah. The sun comes up at about, I think I looked 10:20 right now.
10:20. Okay.
10:20 is
Okay.
when we get sunrise. Yeah.
You're 50 minutes away.
Yeah, exactly.
By the time we're done, you'll be getting some light.
Exactly.
It can be hard to get motivated in the morning
It
to
can
wake up.
be,
That's
yes.
true.
Oh, I mean, I could completely appreciate what that would feel like without really appreciating what that could feel like.
Yeah, we have one of those like sunrise alarm clocks, which strives to help, but I don't know.
It does.
Maybe it helps a bit.
Still dark outside.
Still dark.
My daughter has one of those.
We'll take all the help we can get
Yeah.
to try to adjust our bodies to more natural daylight.
Given the bruise that you're looking at outside, because it's, as you described it, Chris, it was like a kind of like a bluish hinge and bluish hint of color with some black.
You can see the silhouettes of the trees. They're there. I know there's trees out there.
Well, you know that because of what you've seen before. But
Yeah, exactly. I'm probably making it
now.
up.
So let's talk about that. I mean, because I think that one of the more interesting things that we can talk about, and we didn't touch on in part 1, was talking about what it's like designing in the environment that you're in, and you're seeing the true extremes of what this world has to offer. So what are those extremes, for anyone that's wondering what those extremes can be?
Yeah, so in Whitehorse, we're at 60 degrees north here. So we're not even that north, to be honest. I mean, for most Canadians, we probably seem north, but for Northern Canadians, we're kind of north light is what we say. But
Okay.
I would say
We're not in the Arctic.
We're not in the Arctic. We're in the subarctic. So,
Okay.
but yeah, in the winter we get, I think I looked just to be sure before the podcast, we get about 5 hours of sunlight at the worst end in December, and then in June, I think the sun goes down for about 3 hours here, 4 hours, but we don't actually get true night in June. We just get twilight. It's kind of an amazing experience.
Cool.
You lose the black sky and the stars for a few weeks.
Yeah.
If you go further north to like a Nuvik or Old Crow, I mean, they're getting it far worse than we are, or far better, depending how you look at it. But so there's the light, and then there's the weather. I mean, it's not, Whitehorse is quite moderated compared to say somewhere like Yellowknife, because we are closer to the ocean.
Right.
But
We
it's
get a little bit of those effects from the ocean.
we do get some of those effects from the ocean. We're about an hour and a half drive from Skagway from the ocean.
Okay.
But I would say in the winter, what is it? On average, it's about -15, -20, a typical day.
I would say -20, 23, kind of on average.
Yeah, we'll definitely
winter,
get a
but
few
it does-
weeks of -40.
Celsius, right?
Yeah, Celsius.
Celsius, yeah. And we'll definitely get -40 for a few weeks every winter. But in the summer, it can be 30 degrees here. And that's the temperature swing, right?
But more commonly, I guess, like our average summer temperature can be like kind of plus 23 Celsius.
Yeah, I would say that's a hot
Which is
day.
ideal. Like that is just
Yeah.
perfect weather.
It's pretty nice.
It is perfect. The problem is there's not enough of it. But
Yeah.
but those are the swings. It's the temperature and it's the light, and that's kind of what we've got to deal with.
You find in the summer is almost like stressful in a way because you have to make hay while it's summer.
Yeah.
You know, you have like what 12 weekends of good weather each year that you feel like stressed if you don't take full advantage of.
Yeah, you got to get out to the lake. You got to get in the kayak. You got to get hiking.
Yeah, you got to do all the things.
Yeah.
Right.
Teach
And
your
if, you,
kids how to
if
ride a
you're
bike.
bedridden and sick, you're just like miserable.
Yeah.
Exactly. You don't
Yeah.
want to. You do not want to lose. You don't want to be that person
Yeah.
that has a cold in the summertime. Like that's the worst.
A little Dan Mankin reference.
Yeah.
And what about humidity? Are you still dealing with levels of humidity in the summertime?
No,
It's very
it's
dry.
very dry here. Whitehorse is very dry. It does not rain very much, and we get quite a bit of snow accumulation, but that's because it doesn't melt. It's not because we get a lot of snow at any given time. It's just
It doesn't go away.
yeah, from Halloween it snows, and then it's not gone till May 1st, right? So it's like accumulation, but it's not like a large amount of snow.
I would say with climate change,
It's snowing
we are
more.
getting more precipitation.
Definitely. It's getting wetter
so we
here.
are getting more snow. But
What's climate change?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's that?
I know.
What are we talking
We
about here?
feel it a lot up here. It's
Yeah.
pretty extreme. But when I was growing up here, it was, I always say, maybe I'm misremembering, but I feel like
This is one of the stories, walking uphill both ways. Yeah.
I feel like other people corroborate the story, but it was so much colder that there actually wasn't that much snow. Like it was almost like too cold to snow most of the year.
And that definitely still happens.
And
it can be too cold to snow.
Yeah, it'd be really cold, but really dry and not very much snow on the ground. But it used to be in winter that it would be beautiful, like blue skies, sunny days in the winter. And it's getting a bit cloudier now. With climate, I feel like. Yeah. But it's the extremes are interesting. I mean, it keeps it diverse.
And then when you bring the two things together, like there is nothing like the light at -30 or -40, because you just don't get clouds hanging in the sky, and the river downtown, you just get a ton of ice fog, and then you get this really low light filtering through the ice fog. It's just, it is kind of magical, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. The sun shining through the ice crystals in the air. And then you get this like certain quality of light. I don't really know how to describe it, but every time it happens, it's amazing.
Yeah, even the snow kind of shimmers in a way that I haven't seen elsewhere.
Yeah.
What about the aurora borealis?
Oh yeah, we see that all the time.
I would say, admittedly, we take it a bit for granted.
Wait, Chris responded, yeah, we see it all the time.
Yeah.
It's true. It's often like, we see it so much that on nights where it's supposed to be like, forecast to be really strong northern lights, we won't like stay up to watch.
Yeah, because you're gonna maybe catch it another night.
Yeah, I don't know.
But so often we'll wake up in the middle of the night, and you'll look out the bedroom window and they'll be dancing in the sky. You'll watch them for 5 minutes. You're like, that's beautiful, and then you go back to bed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not that they're not amazing, but you do get to see them quite often. That's great.
Yeah, we are lucky that way.
So tell me, because I admittedly have not done the research on this to know, but I'm assuming like building code is completely different. So like what do our values have to look like in wall assemblies? Like what's base code on wall assembly?
Yeah,
so we use like the national building code here in the Yukon. We're not like large enough to have our own like specific building code.
Yeah, and so like it depends whether it's a Part 9 building or Part 3, like small or large. What you're using either 936, which is the energy efficiency section in the National Building Code, or the National Energy Code. We're in climate zone 7B here, and it goes up to 8, so it gets worse. Definitely.
We're not the worst.
It definitely gets worse, but the wall assemblies need to be, depending which code you're looking at, but around R35 effective. Okay. The roof for the walls, the roof, like depending again what type of roof, around R50, but generally as a practice, we're targeting at least R40 for the walls and R60, but usually R80 for the roof.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes we'll, on like our larger projects, we'll have an energy model that, depending on the priorities of the client, they might want to do more energy efficiency or just kind of do the bare minimum. And we're surprised. Right. We're surprised sometimes at what that energy model allows those R values to be. Sometimes it's quite low, which seems bizarre.
Yeah.
we're looking at the building holistically. So
Right.
can't argue with the science behind that.
And then I guess in many ways the structure, right? Just for the load, for the amount of snow.
Yeah. I mean, we definitely look at that. But again, it doesn't snow that much, but we definitely have to take that in consideration, especially with climate change, because
Right.
it is snowing more and more here.
Yeah, we find ourselves, and like our structural engineer, looking sort of to the future, I guess, of like more precipitation and more snow.
Yeah. Okay. So tell me, like, when you're trying to address managing the client expectations, are you dealing with clients? And I say this from the residential standpoint. Are your clients those that live there, or are they vacation homes? Or do you get a mix of both?
Almost everybody lives here.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, I'd say the Yukon the secret hasn't gone out enough that people are building, cabins and stuff here. But also
Don't spread the word too much.
Yeah,
It's nice to be
exactly.
here.
But we're just so far from anything. You'd really have to make the trek. So most of our clients are definitely locals. Like in the fall when it's hunting season, you will see some private jets at the Whitehorse airport, especially with American tails. They're usually wealthy people coming up to do some hunting.
Well, and winter tourism is becoming more of a thing. It seems like there's not many places in the world that actually experience winter anymore. And so it's becoming more and more rare, I suppose. And so we're getting, tourists from Mexico and we've always have had lots of tourists from like Germany and things like that. But
yeah, in the winter we're getting more and more tourists from Mexico and from Asia, people who are coming to experience winter. We don't get any Canadian tourists usually in the winter because Canadians generally don't want to experience more winter.
we're well versed at the torment of winter.
Yeah, exactly. Don't want it any worse.
Yeah, why go farther north? Yeah.
Yeah, but most of our clients are local for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I largely wanted to ask that question because, are you having to educate people about what to experience from a building standpoint or not? And so assuming, now obviously you're not, are they people that have been long established living there in Whitehorse, or are some of them new, like they've transferred there for work, or they've recently moved there from somewhere else in the country, or
Whitehorse is growing really rapidly. I mean, quote unquote rapidly. But the last few years, I think, Whitehorse itself, there's about 30,000 people, and it's been growing by about 800 to 1,000 people a year the last 2 or 3 years, which is a lot to absorb for a city of 30,000. So we do have some clients who have recently just come here. But I would say anybody who's been here for a while, Yukoners are really well versed in our values. Like you wouldn't expect a client to come in and start talking about wall assemblies, but they do. They just do. They know about HRVs, heat recovery ventilators. They know about our values. And usually you never have a client coming in saying, I want to minimize my building envelope. It just doesn't happen.
If it's like a private client, sometimes the developers will want to do the minimum because they want to make as much money.
Because they're not on the hook for the O&M.
Because they're not on the hook, for the O&M. So sometimes we get a little bit of pushback from our developer clients for our values, but usually we don't have any fight with residential clients about our values.
Right.
No, never.
Okay.
Sometimes we find that they actually push for more, and we have to say there's only limited payback at a certain point.
Yeah.
Right.
If you go so high, like the extra that you're spending on these R values isn't going to pay down the road. Yeah.
And are there certain materials that you find that you really like working with, just based on locale?
Well, that's a whole question.
This is the challenge of our whole practice, is our limited building palette, I would say.
Yeah. So
material palette.
Like, and we, whenever our new hires, we've got a number of people from Ontario in our office, and all of them have driven up from Ontario
when they move here.
And I think it's really important to do that, to know how far we are from anything. We're the same distance from Edmonton as Edmonton is from Thunder Bay, almost exactly to the kilometer.
It's like 2 full days of driving from Edmonton.
Yeah, there's not an awful lot between here and Edmonton. There's Grand Prairie, Fort St. John, but these are small places. And
what you're saying is you don't want to be driving there with like a Tesla.
No. Well, that's a whole other question. But yeah. So in terms of materials, like getting things here, everything has to be shipped. We don't
We don't have a
really
rail.
make anything here. There's no rail connection. So
Right.
the materials that we work with have to be really robust because
Right.
the environment demands it.
Right.
But they also have to be affordable because we have to stretch our dollars usually for our budgets. But they have to be really light. So we use a lot of metal siding, like a lot. And whether we like it or not, is another question. But we do use a lot of metal siding. We use a lot of corrugated metal because it goes up in sheets.
Yep.
It's easier to ship.
It's easier to ship. It flat packs.
Yep.
It's very durable.
There's actually no masons in the Yukon, so we don't ever work with masonry.
No. There's no masons?
No.
There's no masons in the Yukon, so we don't do any masonry. Like sometimes for a large institutional project,
they'll bring them up.
They'll bring them up. You know,
Project
if you have some CMUs, like some concrete block,
yeah,
and stuff like that. But there's just no brick in the Yukon, none. Because again, there's no masons, but then you have to ship those bricks up here. It just doesn't work out. Like the math just doesn't make sense.
And then even there is, like we were just talking about it before this interview, there's no Portland cement plant here. So Portland cement has to be shipped up the highway.
So even our concrete is very expensive.
To produce any concrete.
Yeah, we got lots of sand, we got lots of aggregate and water, but the Portland cement all gets shipped up here. So concrete is very, very expensive. So we use it sparingly too.
Wow.
I know. It is.
The material palettes are pretty thin that you can kind of play with on a regular basis, but they also have to be very robust because it's really cold. The temperatures are really extreme.
Yeah, lots of temperature swings. And then the UV is also really strong.
Yeah, you get intense sun in the summertime. So it doesn't play very nice with wood actually, which is kind of ironic. That you wouldn't see a lot of real wood cladding in the Yukon, but the UV really wreaks havoc on it.
The freeze thaw.
And then it's very dry here, so it dries out. Our first house, we're like, you know what, we're gonna do cedar.
Our first house for ourselves.
We're like, we're gonna do, no matter what anybody says, we're gonna do it. And it just dried out. It just dried out. I was afraid like if you kick it, it would just turn to dust. Like it was so dry. I've never seen cedar turn that dry before.
Crazy.
Yeah. So it's an extreme environment. So yeah, you have to use robust, lightweight, and affordable materials.
Yeah, the cost of construction in the Yukon in general. Whitehorse, we're pretty lucky in that it's less than the rest of the Yukon for the cost of construction, but we're generally tasked with being really cost effective in our materials.
And are they using spray foam, or are they using bat and Roxol and?
Yeah, usually bat and Roxol, like a lot of outboard board insulation. We try to use like Roxol rock wool as much as we can, because it's more vapor permeable, obviously. But you know, we do use some foams too. We try not to use too much spray foam, just because one of the considerations here too is, you know, if buildings move and you're relying on that spray foam for more than just insulation, you know, and then are you going to start to get into trouble later if it starts to continuity of your vapor or your air barrier, you know, as it starts to move and maybe delaminate from substrates. So we try to use as little spray foam as we can. I mean, it's kind of amazing stuff. It's like when in doubt, you can use spray foam, right? That's when you can't figure out another detail, but we try not to use too much of it.
Yeah.
Okay. And so then what about light? Because like light, the RCP, when you're involved in projects and you're the ones designing the interiors, how now I know, okay, great. Like everyone has to have light. Like we have light here, you have light there, great. But I feel like the way in which light can be utilized inside a home when you only have 5 hours worth of daylight.
Yeah, we always say that, you know, in our designs, and like our architecture, we often utilize large windows, which isn't uncommon, I guess, in architecture.
Yeah.
But sometimes our clients will say things like, well, you know, I want the windows to be smaller because it'll be more energy efficient. And I'm like, but you have to, like, we always sell it as bringing in as much of that light, taking advantage of the light that we have and bringing it in as much as possible.
If there's a photon of light outside, you want it in the house.
Yeah.
Like you don't want to have it bouncing off the house.
It's true. We've never had a client after, you know, we install the large windows and they're living in the house, they're like, you know, I'll never go back. Like just having the large windows, bringing in all that light and being able to see the light outside is worth like the trade-off in the energy efficiency, which we trade off in other ways with like, increased R values and things. But we also, because it is so dark a lot of the year in the winter, you do have that, what is it, that like black hole effect when you're inside and it's just black outside for like however many hours a day.
Yeah, so we do find you have to throw more light outside around the perimeter of the building.
That's what I was just going to ask you. Like,
if you've got those windows, because you don't want, like our house where we are, we're kind of on an acre outside of town, so we don't throw that much light outside. But it is kind of interesting. You get these kind of black surfaces in your house where you can't see out. So you really do need to throw more of that light outside.
But then, of course, like the consideration is like dark sky and not too much light pollution. But
and then in the summer you get tons of light, right? So the flip side is true. You probably don't want all that light.
Right.
And then, so we do find ourselves kind of playing with different filtering strategies. How to not bring that light in directly, like whether it's reflected light or if it's daylight or not necessarily sunlight. We're not as worried about solar heat gain as maybe parts of Canada because it's not that hot here.
Although it can be.
Though it can be, right? So it's about filtering and shading those same windows. So it's kind of an interesting play. But like you asked, I guess, about interior lighting and
no, I asked about light and light. Okay. Light is natural light and what's it called? Artificial light.
Yeah, so like natural light, we try to get as much in as possible because the light in the winter too, I've never lived somewhere with the light like it is here. Like just the color of the light is pretty amazing. Like you can get pinks and oranges for hours, because so much of it's twilight because the sun is so low.
Right.
It just kind of makes for an amazing experience.
Yeah.
So you want to, in the winter, you want to bring as much in as possible. So we do kind of love large windows.
Yeah.
We get given a hard time for it.
But we do have to consider that like the sun angles in the winter, it's not unique to the Yukon, but it seems like it's more extreme here where in the winter there's some places where we're doing a project and the sun might not even, get into the house in the winter because it doesn't clear the trees or clear the hill because the sun angle is so low. And then in the summer, it's so high.
But then also with that same low sun, you potentially get a lot of glare, right? Like there are times of the year where it's hard to drive anywhere because the sun is just always in your eyes. Usually elsewhere in Canada, you've got those like 15 minutes to half an hour on either end of the day. That's where the sun's kind of annoying when you're driving. And then,
just like something to consider with our like design solutions is where to locate the windows, because in the summer we have so much sun, but the sun really rises in the northeast and sets in the northwest, like the extreme north. And so
it doesn't rise bizarre. In the east and west in the summertime. So
it's like
all of these things are considerations.
I was gonna say, you spend a lot of time doing your sun studies on lot and how it's going to impact the way that they're going to live. I started immediately thinking as you were talking about. And for anyone listening to this, if you work in design, you know me. I'm not here to design. So as I say this, please don't get upset with me. Don't text me. Don't get upset with me, please. I just started thinking of like how you can play with natural light.
Yeah.
By like putting potentially, and it sounds so silly, but this is not what I intend. Like, how you're coming out of a parking garage and you have the mirror, right?
Yeah.
Right, to see the blind spot. Like you had installations, not quite like that, but of that style where it could be like a material installation or something like that helps draw light in from areas on a lot that don't otherwise get it.
Yeah. True. I see where you're going there.
Yeah. No, but reflected light, bringing light in from different unexpected angles. I mean, I think it's all of that's really important.
I think a lot about like even just reflectivity of like our interior surfaces. A wall that's doing a lot of work to get the light deep into the building. Right.
Is it going to be a light wall or a dark wall?
Yeah, we think about that a lot, much more than I did when I practiced and worked down south. We're like, this is a reflection wall. We do not want to put a dark color or a dark material on it.
Yeah, or like if you were to throw, a wood against that wall, is it going to dry out over time or not?
Yep. Yeah.
Based on what the R value is of the window.
Yeah.
So what does that look like? Because I started thinking, I'm going to name drop you, Paul Raff, when I was talking with Paul Raff about this and how they created the Metropolitan station for Vaughan, which is a subway station. And there was all of these metals, reflective metals that were made up of the ceiling so that it brought light in from the exterior and
Yeah.
it traveled down to the base of when you come out of the train. Pretty much you can get this like natural light, and it had all these reflections of people as they were walking. So if someone was wearing red, you'd see red across tons of panels. It was just this interesting play on how to make a subterranean space feel like it was not subterranean.
Like it's light filled. Yeah.
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 Yeah, it's always a challenge. Or if you have a deep floor plate, how to get light in.
Yeah, and that's the trick too. Obviously, the more articulated your building envelope, or the shallower the plan, the less energy efficient the building. But obviously, the deeper the plan, the less likely you are to get that one photon side into the building, right? So it is a balance we're constantly playing with.
Yeah.
But yeah, like we always talk about it, like when we're locating decks and things for our residential clients, I always call it barbecue light, like that light you get around 7.
Yeah.
But then
you almost want them on the west and north side.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like down south, then that's it. But here you might have it till 10, so you can have those north facing decks, and you get this amazing light at 10 o'clock at night, where
Right.
9 o'clock, where you're getting a lot of sun but not a lot of heat. And so if it's a hot summer day, it's kind of beautiful to sit out there and just get sun in your face and not melt.
But generally, unless the deck is south facing, nobody's going to sit there, because in the
This is
summer,
true too.
in the summer, it's not hot enough to sit outside if you're not in the direct sun. If you're like in the shade,
Yeah, it's like 10 degrees colder, right? It's probably
yeah.
13 degrees.
Yeah.
Like give me a sweater or a shawl and a blanket.
Yeah. There's like some restaurants in town that have patios that aren't south and west facing, and they don't do very well. The deck isn't as successful because even if it has a view or something, you're like not in the sun, you're not getting the heat.
Right.
We've been talking about this too. Like we generally have done and will in the future do a lot of multifamily, like a lot of smaller, like a mid-rise, I guess, for anywhere else, residential or mixed-use construction. And the city of Whitehorse mandates that we have outdoor amenity space for those units. It's in the zoning bylaw, so we have to have balconies.
Right.
But balconies in the Yukon are just so questionable in a way, because for multiple reasons. One, the best part of living in Whitehorse is getting out of Whitehorse. Not because there's anything wrong with Whitehorse, but they call it the wilderness city. I mean, 10 minutes outside of town, you have incredible mountain biking and hiking, right?
Look, I don't want this to turn into a domestic, okay? Native and non-native to Whitehorse.
Yeah. This is very true. But so like if you're in a condo, you're very unlikely to want to sit on a balcony for any length of time in the summer, especially if you're not facing south or west and the sun's up. Right. You're just going to go out and do stuff. Right. And then in the winter, they're just there and they have junk on them.
You're not going to stand on your balcony in the winter, of course.
Yeah, and if we do a lot of combustible construction, so the fire code actually says you can't technically have barbecues out there. So people aren't really barbecuing out there.
I think it's just like it's an interesting challenge, and something that we're really thinking about a lot recently is like
how to extend those balconies.
Yeah, what is that
space?
What is that like exterior built space? Like what value does it have in like the shoulder seasons and the winter? And how do you make it like an amenity that people will continue to engage with and utilize?
I know we've been throwing out, like, are they little greenhouses maybe? Like what are they? Are they 3-season spaces?
I was just going to ask you, are you allowed to put structure around the deck to enclose it in any way if it's not?
This is something that we're currently exploring and trying to like push the boundaries on, I would say.
Yeah,
see what we can get away with.
We're working on a project right now. We're going to see what we can get away with both the developer, to see if we can kind of pitch this idea and if it's got legs for them, because obviously it has to have value. Because
it's kind of interesting though that the city mandates that the amenity space in a multifamily project has to be exterior.
Right.
Why can't we provide it inside if it might have more utility 10 months of the year?
Traditionally, and there has to be common outdoor space. So traditionally that'll take the form of roof decks. But But honestly, like a roof deck, as beautiful as the valley that Whitehorse is in is, we get a fair amount of wind from either the south or north. And if you're unprotected, especially in the winter, you're not going to want to be standing on a roof deck. And we find that, we will, and in the past have put them on condos, and you think this is an amazing amenity. People will be out here, and no one is on them because, again, in the summer they're out in the trees, they're at the lake, and in the winter the wind is blowing. They don't want to be up there.
Yeah.
I was just looking at the driving directions from Vancouver to Whitehorse, and I see it's 2,400 kilometers.
Yeah. I think it's 21 from Edmonton. I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
As the crow flies, we're closer to Vancouver, but driving, we're closer to Edmonton.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The highway's a bit more robust from Edmonton to.
Yeah, the Alaska highway's better. Otherwise, you have to drive through the interior of BC and make your way to Fort St. John. There's technically two highways up here. There's also the Stewart Cassiar, which is a bit more of a goat path than the Alaska highway.
It's still like a paved 2-lane highway, but it's just not as well. It doesn't get the
traffic.
The what do I want to call it? Like the trucks delivering food and stuff.
Yeah, they come up the Alaska. Yeah. The Stewart Cassiar is
if
parts
you break
of it,
down, it's less traveled, so it's not as safe.
We've only driven it once, but it is beautiful. I definitely recommend it.
Yeah.
Okay. And have you had projects that are in any of the further extreme areas of the territory?
With snow, we've done projects in Dawson, Haines Junction. So Dawson City is the famous Dawson City. Yep. It's about five hours driving from here.
Northwest.
So we've done projects there. We've done projects in Haines Junction. We're doing a project in Teslin, which is a community kind of southeast of Whitehorse. It's about an hour and a half. But there's only actually one fly-in community in the Yukon. That's kind of an interesting thing about the Yukon, that Nunavut and the Northwest Territories, that's kind of unique to the Yukon, I guess, is we have a more robust highway network than those two territories do. So we only have one fly-in community, which is Old Crow. I've done projects in Old Crow at other firms and other practices, but s.no hasn't done a project in Old Crow. Actually, that's a lie.
We are kind of starting one.
Yeah, we've got a small one. We're insulating the underside of a shop.
It's a
maintenance garage.
It's a very technical project.
Yeah,
it's interesting though.
Are you lifting it, or are you breaking the slab and insulating below?
We're lifting it. So that's just it. Like when
it's permafrost.
It's permafrost in Old Crow. So that's the other thing about the Yukon is, that there's areas without permafrost, there's discontinuous permafrost, and there's just permafrost. And I would say 95% of Whitehorse doesn't have permafrost. You'll hit a pocket every once in a while, but it's very rare.
Dawson, like half of Dawson.
Half of Dawson is on permafrost and half's not, which makes that really interesting. But like Old Crow, when you get that far north, it's all permafrost. So those buildings we call them kind of spaceships. They're always generally floating. There's other ways you can get those buildings on the ground, but this one is going to be a suspended slab on piles. So it's going to be this shop, something they would typically just do a basic slab on grade and put a pre-eng on top of it. But we have to build this whole platform to get it up off the ground and then put a pre-eng building around it. I mean, it's not architecturally, it's not that interesting, but technically it's really interesting.
We're not even really talking about the superstructure at all. We're just talking about the foundation. That's really our involvement.
Yeah, because it's pre-eng, we're not really designing that part of the building. They're just doing it. But yeah, we have to kind of figure out how to build this soffit underneath this thing. So
protect the permafrost.
Yeah, protect the permafrost from thawing.
We have actually, in some ways, like some of our own challenges. Like we literally, while we're on this call, just got permits for a project, and it's at the bottom of a ravine in a floodplain. And so, the helical piles, and you're building like a basin,
right,
for the house.
You're like tanking it,
literally, like it's a bathtub. And all of the stormwater management and all of the engineering, the mechanical, the mechanical engineering, the water engineer, the structural engineer, like everyone connected to this to try to figure out, to make sure that you're not going to run into an issue. So to your point about the challenge, associated challenges, it's interesting because it can be completely different conditions based on geography, but also based on the ground, and that ground, it can be a variance from like literally one lot to the next 30 feet away.
Oh yeah.
Well, it's
Yeah.
interesting in those more northern communities too. They don't have underground utilities, so we have to work with utilidors.
Yes. Yeah. It'll be like
There's like these
floating
above
utilidors.
ground utilities that you have to bring into your buildings,
Yeah, the community
and you
of
have to
Inuvik, which
like,
is in the Northwest Territories,
Yeah.
but is very connected to the Yukon via the Dempster Highway. Yeah, they have a utilidor network where all the sanitary water and the gas travels in these steampunk. They're kind of these corrugated, insulated steampunk
like
boxes that traverse in.
tunnels.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're
Never
pretty cool.
even occurred to me to ask you the question about like, basic functioning of services.
Yeah, so our like in Whitehorse again, like we're
It's pretty
north, we're
standard.
No,
north
I know where
Whitehorse.
you are. I'm saying like
Yeah,
to
Yeah.
that point, like
Yeah.
what you're
yeah.
dealing with on some of those like real rural projects.
Hmm.
Oh yeah, we're always talking about water available for firefighting. That's a serious concern.
Even in Whitehorse, like
Even in Whitehorse, outside of Whitehorse, it's sanitary and water. Like, are we? There's some communities in the Yukon that they're on wells, but there's a sanitary network, which is really odd to me as a former Southern Canadian. That we're that we're not providing water, but we'll take your gray water and your black water. So like every community is
has
is different and has different requirements.
A project that we did in Dawson just a couple of years ago. It's a duplex for the government, and Dawson is really it has some lots have permafrost, and so often you're building on like wood cribbing, where it's like gets the main floor elevation above the building. But then the challenge is how do you get it still has like underground services, so how do you get the services from the building into the ground through this
floating building.
And like how do you keep it warm from freezing?
And then in Old Crow, you need space for for septic tanks, like because they do pump out because it's on the permafrost. So you need tanks for water, for that, for sanitary. Like every community is different, which makes it fun to work here.
And you have to bring in the correct consultants to be able to work with you on establishing.
Yeah, absolutely. And we want to make sure that the consultants we work with have that northern experience, because not only is there the environment, and understanding kind of the regulations and everything around that, but there's just what is available for maintenance and what can we fix and what kind of capacity do we have in the communities to fix these systems. So like more often than not, we're not using these kind of really intense, innovative, active systems. We're trying to use as many passive kind of simple systems as possible. So if it breaks down, we have the capacity and expertise here to fix it, or parts aren't hard to come by,
That's what I was going to ask you next. What about like the longevity of these components, and like what does that look like if access to components can be a challenge? How do you look at the general maintenance of something? When something's getting built, do they give a client the breakdown of like what they believe to be the expectancy of the product?
Yeah, like we'll definitely do some of that, and like in the communities with pump out tanks, we usually, those communities more often than not, we will build these spaceship buildings because they generally are on permafrost. And we'll have to design knockout walls in these kind of utility crawl spaces underneath to pull these tanks out. In 30 years, you have to think this tank's going to have to get replaced. It's not going to last as long. Its lifespan is not as long as the building itself. So we will design these knockout walls and anchor points so you can pull and yank these things out and slide a new one in.
That's so interesting.
Sorry, what was that?
What you just talked about, knockout walls and anchor points, is probably one of the strongest takeaways I've heard. That is such an interesting concept. I'm bringing that back to so many people that I talk to here before it goes to air.
I know it's a very common like talking point when we're starting a project, in a community. They'll say, we don't want any fancy mechanical systems here that we can't maintain, like with the trades in this community. We don't want to deal with having to shut this facility down for a week while we wait for a part to be shipped in from Edmonton, or fly in a like skilled trade to work on this propane or whatever it is.
We're designing an elders housing project. It's five or six units in Teslin for TTC, the Teslin Tlingit Council, the First Nation there. And there's no permafrost there, so we're just doing shallow foundation, strip footings, crawl space. The walls, we're going to have obviously concrete frost walls like foundation walls, but there is going to be one wall in that crawl space that's PWF, that's pressure treated wood. so that in 30 years they can pop that part of the foundation out if they need to pull the water tank out.
Yeah, because they don't have water service.
Because they don't,
it's on delivery.
It's on delivery. So if they need to replace or maintain that water tank, that's how we've designed the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Delivery.
I know.
Yeah,
it's not uncommon.
No, it's not. It's not uncommon at all.
Yeah,
like the water truck guy will show up. Every person will show up. Every 2 days, or it's definitely like a job in the communities. The water
you hope that when they're driving, they don't run into any black ice or anything like that. Like that is
and you don't want them to have a sick day too. Especially the pump out person. You don't want them to have a sick day, because if you need to pump your tank out, you definitely want to pump.
Hold on, as you apologize for saying that, I got to say this. You did use the word native, and I don't know whether or not I might have used it in the wrong context. So if anyone is offended by having heard me say that, I apologize. It is not intended. It was perhaps more naive. I was internalizing that as I watched you turn Jackie there, Chris, and say sorry. What did I say that I'm guilty of? And I.
And I guess that is the other really kind of incredible part of living in the Yukon is I don't want to get this wrong, I believe there's technically 14 First Nations whose traditional territory is in the Yukon. 10 of those First Nations are self-governing, I think, and somebody have to fact check me on this, but I believe there's only, and I've heard this and maybe it's not true, but there's only 22 First Nations in the country that are self-governing. So they have a very, very different.
11 of them are here.
10 of them are here. They have a very the First Nations, their governments. It is a very different model, and a lot of our clients, our most important clients, to be honest, are First Nation governments, and it's really important to living here. I think a quarter or a third of the people who live in the Yukon identify as First Nations or Indigenous. So it's a really important part of the culture here, and I think that it's been a really important part of our practice is working with First Nation clients.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
and those governments.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and each of those governments typically will have a development corporation whose shareholder is the First Nation, and their mandate is to make money for the shareholder and build capacity. So we work with a lot of dev corps, and there's usually a community corp, which is somewhere between a not-for-profit and a profit corporation. They're generally supposed to make money, but it's more about capacity building and supporting opportunity building and supporting their citizens and building those kind of business connections and pieces like that. So there's always a community corp usually and a development corp, or maybe multiples of each. And so a lot of our clients are First Nation clients, whether through the dev corps, the community corps, or the governments themselves. So.
Yeah, it's really interesting, doing projects. We're doing a project right now in Dawson City, and Dawson City, of course, has this really sort of famous or infamous gold rush history. But of course, like the gold rush period was only 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, something like that.
Yeah.
And, the history of the First Nation there is, far exceeds this gold rush period, but the whole town of Dawson City has this sort of visual identity as a gold rush town. Right. And it's interesting to navigate that. There's a lot of people who feel really, really passionate about preserving the gold rush identity in Dawson City. And then when we're doing projects for the First Nation, or even just for the town of Dawson, the town of the city of Dawson or something like that, trying to figure out what's appropriate in terms of like an architectural identity.
But I'd say that like when I first moved here, which was 12, 13 years ago now, like so much of the Yukon's identity was wrapped up kind of in that gold rush story, really colonialism, right? Like let's not sugarcoat it. And that was a moment in time. It had an effect on this place and things happened, but so much of the identity was wrapped up in that, and the architectural identity. Mm-hmm. And then I went to a meeting, I don't know, but this was before s.no started, but maybe like 2, 3, 4 years ago, just to show how much it's changed. It was a housing action committee meeting that I went to. I was working on a housing project, and people could kind of throw out questions, and there was a leading question that somebody threw out was like, how much should this building reflect history? And as an architect, I'm immediately thinking, I call it Klonditecture, like Klondike architecture. I'm like, okay, somebody's saying they want this thing to look gold rush. Like that's the question. And the response at the table was, well, whose history? And I was like, okay, we've come a long way. Like that's great that we're starting having those conversations.
It's not always.
It's not always
who's at the table.
It depends who's at the table, but it's happening more and more. And as architects, it's really refreshing to see.
Yeah. I want to tell you that I did a fact check for you.
Okay.
So there are 43 Indigenous communities in Canada are involved in 25 self-governing agreements.
Okay.
25,
Yeah, 25. There you go.
This is the AI from Google. So whether or not that is completely
I'm glad you fact checked though, because I thought I had heard 22, but so I was close with 22.
Yeah. 25 self-governing agreements across Canada involving 43 Indigenous communities.
Yeah.
Which
10 of those are in the Yukon. So it's really different. I certainly don't want to speak for any community, but it does feel like the Yukon's kind of further down the reconciliation kind of path than the rest of Canada. It kind of feels like we're
if you've got
a bit ahead.
40% of those communities are there, then you would assume that they're going to be further along, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's and just as clients, like it really kind of brings kind of a wealth of experience to our practice. Or
we sometimes feel like some of our work with our First Nation clients it can be more enriching.
Yeah, for sure.
It feels like those projects can have like a larger impact on individual people, more so than some of our
other stuff.
Yeah.
So do you feel like given the location of where you are that you're sometimes, and this is going to be a funny question, but do you feel like your desire for when you go on vacation, if you go on vacation? So actually, let me ask that. So this is a yes or no question. Do you like to go on vacation? Like, do you leave? Do you
yes.
fly? Okay.
We like as much.
I would actually say we find it very important.
Yeah, as much as I love the Yukon and living here, people here call it going outside. That's capital O. People say, "Are you from outside? Or are you going outside?" Capital O. So yes, we go outside. Yes.
We find it's like for us particularly, we enjoy, really good food and seeing crowds of people and
that we don't recognize.
Seeing people that we don't know at the, when we go to a store or something. And so there are some good quality restaurants here, but a handful, I would say. And so it's really, we try to travel. We try to at least, pop down to Calgary, Edmonton, or Vancouver for a long weekend.
Okay.
So get out and.
So my next question is, if you're going on vacation, are you keen on wanting to go to warm destinations? Are you keen on wanting to go to like ski or snow destinations? Like what does it look like for you? What's
I think as an architect, I want to go to Iceland, Finland, northern Europe,
Norway.
Siberia, Norway. That's what I want to see as an architect.
We want to do those sort of like professional trips, but it's like when do we do that?
Yeah, I want to see how other Northerners live, or Greenland, right? Like I want to see that.
But when we go on family vacations,
we go somewhere hot.
We go somewhere warm.
We want to see the sun.
We definitely go south. Yeah.
Because what you just said, Chris, is, to be honest, what I was wondering, like, are you of the mindset that you want to gain some level of knowledge and experience from what others are doing in other areas?
Absolutely.
You're experiencing in some ways a similar type of climate, and how they're trying to engage with that, both from like a built model, but also from a client engagement model and what they're utilizing across, the many streams of typologies of architecture.
Yeah, it's on our bucket list to do like a northern architecture trip.
Yeah.
To do.
I don't know if it's on the bucket list. It's something we want to do in the next few years.
Yeah.
And just see how others live and others deal with the same constraints.
I think it would be really valuable.
I feel like you've got to go to Japan.
Yeah.
We've both been in separate, not together, but we've both been to Japan. I went when I was, it was part of like some school exchange program when I was a teenager. But I would love to go back. I just love traveling. One thing that, when my family first moved to the Yukon, my dad worked for the feds as a customs officer.
You were saying that. Yeah.
He had a really sweet benefits package where like the government subsidized travel for our family, like
because of where you were.
Yeah, it was like a remote living benefit.
Right.
And so growing up, we were lucky enough to travel a lot, like once a year.
So where did you go? Let's go on in a little time travel right now.
We did like a Fiji, a New Zealand, we did Hawaii. I'm trying to think, Florida, things like that. I'm kind of blanking on where else we went. But I did like a Japan trip with school.
I mean, you just named some pretty exotic, beautiful places. Florida, maybe
Yeah.
not as much, but definitely like Fiji, Hawaii. Like,
Yeah.
wow. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so that sort of experience as a child growing up, I want to try to give that to our kids so that they see, different cultures, different places. It's nice to travel and like luxurious to do that, but it's also, I think, important to instill that like love of travel and seeing other cultures.
Yeah.
And it just sort of happens to, be also really nice to do that,
Yeah.
to travel and see other things. Yeah.
If only there was somehow like more time.
I know. And then the school, like, the school breaks for them, and then the time out, like we run our own practice. And so any time that we take away from the office, we have to be really strategic about, being like, is it a work? Like, are we going to be on call? Are we not going to check our phones? Like, is that possible? Is that responsible? All these things. It's complicated, but we try to balance it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Try.
We try.
That was not a very confidence-induced answer there. We try.
We try. It's a little bit easier for me, admittedly, to sort of compartmentalize our work life from our personal life. Chris has a bit of a harder time kind of shutting off that stress from work.
I don't have my work email pushed to my personal phone because Jackie won't let me.
Yeah.
Because why was I spoke through it.
Oh, Jackie won't let me because I can't shut off if I get that email, I have to action it, or I have to stress out about it and not action it. That's even worse. I'm just gonna sit there and ruminate on it and not deal with it. But
yeah, it's true. So if we go on vacation, I'm like, okay, I will check the work email occasionally.
And
I will let you know if anything is exploding, but I will take care of it.
I feel like I might have told this story with someone else once, but I do remember we were on a project, and I remember I was like with my family. We were in Florida. We were on a beach, and if we were at the beach for 4 hours, I was on a call for a project for 3.5 of those 4 hours.
Yeah.
Because there are times when you just need to be. And I remember like I left the beach that day, and I was like, I don't know if I can do something like this again. I'm all grumpy. I'm on vacation. I don't, this is not what I'm looking for.
Yeah, it's hard. We are trying to get better at setting some like boundaries for ourselves because, we obviously do everything together. We live, we're married, we run the firm together, and it's very easy for, the kind of day-to-day of running the business to filter over to our time where we're supposed to not be working.
Right.
Where it's hard to set those boundaries. There's never enough hours in the day. But we are trying, when we go on vacation with our kids, we try to like strategically, do something at Christmas break where like a lot of our clients aren't expecting that we're going to be checking email, so we can be more present.
But I guess I should give a shout out to the rest of the s.no team too, because we haven't yet. I mean, Emily started with us 3 years ago, and so
she was our first hire.
She was our first.
She's still with us.
She's still with us, and so we're.
What's up, Emily?
We have a bit of a team now who we can throw things to, and we can disappear, and that's okay.
We're trying to get there.
We're trying to learn to let go.
It's hard to to give up some of that control, but we are realizing that for our own sanity and for like the number of projects that we have in the office to support like a 5-person team, we can't manage it all, and so we rely on our team to help us with that.
Yeah, look, I mean, as you say that, I'm going to say like I'm not one of the principals of our company. Bruce and Danny are the two owners, and I think that when I started working at the company, I had said to them like, what do your vacations look like?
Mm-hmm.
Like your personal vacations, are you always on the phone? Are you always working? And the answer was like, yeah, like they do what they need to do to be able to make the business run.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember saying to them, and I'm not going to, gentlemen, if you're listening to this, you'll be able to come back to me and tell me whether or not this is accurate. But I think I've always said, like, I want to be able to take on what you need to do so that you can go on vacation knowing that it's being looked after. So you
Yeah.
can enjoy your vacation. So that when I want to go on vacation,
You can also.
I don't have to have that stress knowing that other people can look after the things that I need to do.
Mhm.
Because if you can create that type of a mentality internally, and actually I will say this because it's really stood out to me. I interviewed an interior designer whose name was Julian Gillies, and what she had said to me, which was really, really interesting, that they set their team up in almost like a buddy system.
Mm.
And so if someone wanted to go away, their buddy would be the one that would pick up their work.
Mhm.
And then when that other person wanted to go away, the role would switch.
Yeah,
And
that's
so
interesting.
it was a really creative approach to ensuring that when people went away on vacation, all the emails that were stacking up in their inbox were being addressed by someone else, so
Mhm.
that when they came back, they didn't have the fatigue of knowing they're coming back to work and having to go read through 150 emails.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's a
it's
good
just a
way to do
really,
it.
really, really unique approach to addressing what vacation time can look like.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a really interesting way to do it.
Yeah.
It always, you know, it always seems like the preparation for a vacation is like so much work and makes you think, oh, this is even worth going on
Is it
vacation.
worth it? Yeah, exactly.
I have to do all this prep work.
It's
Yeah.
always worth it.
Yeah.
It is
I
always
know
worth it.
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in some ways, like, yeah, it would be easier to run the practice if we weren't married. In some ways, it's easier to run it because we are married. Like if we were two separate principals,
Yeah.
I could go on vacation and be like, okay, Jackie, it's all hands on deck for you. I'm
Yeah.
gone. But now when we go together. We like vacationing together, family.
That's nice.
Yeah, it's nice after 18 years, still wanting to do that. But yeah, like, so that is a bit of more of a complicated wrinkle. But yeah, our team, we need to learn to let go, and our team is really getting robust. I mean, the office has only been open for 4 years, but
Yeah.
that we can leave. We left for 2 weeks in September. Was the first time we've just kind of disappeared. We went to Greece for 2 weeks.
Chris turned 40,
I
and
turned
he's like,
40,
I
yeah.
want to go to Greece, just us, no kids.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
It was
For 2 weeks, you went to Greece with no children?
Yes.
I know. It was halfway through the vacation. I just kind of looked around. I'm like, what is happening in my life?
I know.
Is this quiet? I've got a drink in my hand. I was like, this is amazing.
You don't have to do dishes,
Exactly.
folding laundry.
I know.
Telling the kids to get out the door to go to school on time.
Yeah, you have natural daylight for a normal amount of time.
I know. I'm wearing a t-shirt. Like, it was,
yeah. I know, it was amazing, but it was like a lot of prep. We had to, like, organize all the childcare, do all that sort of negotiating ahead of time, and then also like leaving in sort of like peak getting foundations in the ground season.
Yep.
It was a bit like the prep work that we had to do to like let everybody know we were going away, because the time frame, it wasn't ideal, like that period of time to be gone for, but it was amazing.
It was what it was.
Well, and I'm assuming you probably spent like a day or so on and off on your computer for the first like day of the vacation. Oh no.
We're like, I am not touching anything.
Wow.
It was, we tried
I told Emily, I was like, I'm not going to check my email. I'm not, but like, send me a message on Instagram if you need me. Like, if something is exploding, get me on Instagram. But I know.
I disabled Teams. Yeah, there was no email.
Yeah, I even took my, like, I turned off all like my calendar notifications, like for whatever things.
I have some friends, and I don't know how many times I've mentioned her name on this podcast, and I think at this point I'm like, oh, it's almost redundant. But Brenda Eisen, okay, she is the principal of Eisen Architecture here in Toronto. We work a lot with her, and Brenda does this beautiful thing where she takes off her birthday.
That's right.
Okay, I've never done it. I have other friends that do the same thing, and they take off their birthday and they celebrate themselves. And you do it because you spend so much time literally celebrating or working for everything else that you have to deliver. Why not take that one day for yourself? I
like that idea a lot. Yeah. Jackie and I naively, when we started the office, we're like, there's going to be lots of times we're just doing,
and it'll be so easy. We'll have days we can just take off.
Yeah, there's going to be these 4-day weeks. We're just going to take off a random Thursday. It has not happened yet.
So I mean, there are. It's as I'm saying this, I'm actually trying to like harbor it for my own self too. While I'm telling you
Yeah.
and others that are listening, there is value in some self-worth and time to mentally recharge yourself,
Mhm.
to engage in the work in just a different way where it doesn't feel like you've just been dropped with this paperweight on your shoulders that you've got to kind of move through. So all that said, I have so enjoyed this conversation with you over these last two episodes. It has been like really so enjoyable. The two of you are
Likewise.
fantastic. It's so easy to chat with you. I really hope that you find a way to make it to Toronto at some point. No, like,
Oh, we will. I'm sure we
and
will.
if you do, you let me know, and I will organize a group, and we will all get together and have a great night out.
That
So
sounds
there's that as an opportunity. I say it. I've said it. I say it. I always say it. Thank you for the candor. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being as open with me and the dialogue about yourselves and your practices you have. I really have. I've so enjoyed chatting with you. I kind of wish you were in the city. I would love to. I'd love to go out for a drink with the two of you.
Yeah, someday. I'm
Yeah.
sure we'll get there.
You know, or tea or whatever it is.
Either, both. Who knows?
So I again appreciate it. Thank you. I look forward to when this airs, and I hope that you as a listener have really enjoyed this. I'm going to say it again. Give us the 5 stars on whatever streaming service you're listening to right now. It's going to take you a second. If you're driving, pull over, tell the person behind you to just leave you alone for a second. Do it. We need it. We want the exposure, because the stories like Jackie and Chris telling theirs, it's so interesting, and it's helping make up the experience you get when you enter into a city and you drive through the town or you drive through the streets. Like, you are changing in some ways. You're changing Whitehorse with what you're putting out there, and it's a beautiful thing, and the surrounding areas. So I'm end rant, and thank you again.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks for
you.
having
This
us on.
was great.